Trust is the foundation of progress. Yet in a world of rapid technological change and growing complexity, it often feels like the missing piece. I'm Matt Yarger, and I've spent years working at the intersection of sustainability, technology, and innovation. Through this podcast, I sit down with leaders, visionaries, and changemakers to explore one key question: what builds trust? From global systems to personal decisions, we'll dive into how trust, or the lack of it, shapes our world. Join me as we uncover insights, challenge assumptions, and explore how we can create a future built on trust. Let's get started. Welcome to the Future of Trust, where we explore how trust is built, broken, and rebuilt in the systems shaping our world. I'm your host, Matt Yarger. Today, I'm joined by Richard Savoie, a systems builder who has worked across healthcare, logistics, and transportation, focused on how people learn to trust the systems that guide real-world decisions. Trust rarely breaks loudly. Most of the time, it erodes quietly, one small doubt at a time. A number that feels off, a recommendation that does not quite match reality, or a system that is technically correct but still ignored. Richard has spent his career sitting right in the middle of that tension. He started in regulated medical devices, where mistakes are not theoretical and trust is not optional. In that world, data has lineage, accountability is clear, and failure forces learning. Later, he moved into logistics and transportation, a very different environment, but one facing its own quiet crisis: labor shortages, rising complexity, pressure to automate faster than people are ready to trust the systems doing the work. In our first conversation, Richard and I shared that his focus on trust did not come only from engineering. It came from his experience. A long professional relationship ended when trust was broken in a way that forced him to rethink how people protect themselves, how they recover, and how they decide who or what deserves their confidence going forward. Today, Richard builds digital twins of logistics networks that help fleets decide how to move, when to electrify, and where automation fits. These systems do not just analyze, they recommend action, and that is where trust becomes real. If operators do not believe the data, they stop listening. If they cannot explain a decision, they override it. If accountability is unclear, adoption stalls. This episode is not about technology for its own sake. It is about the human threshold where trust either forms or fails. We talk about early environments and how they shape responsibility. We talk about why people trust Google Maps without thinking, and why enterprise systems still struggle to earn the same confidence. And we explore what happens next as AI, EVs, and autonomous systems move from experiments into everyday infrastructure. Rich, let's dig in. It's been awesome just kind of getting to know you, watching what you're working on, and understanding just the wealth of experience you have on the technical side. I have a lot of different people on this podcast, from climate to blockchain to regulators to all kinds of things. But you're in an area that I really, really care about. I don't know if you can see behind me, but I've got my McLaren F1 car over here. I've got a smaller version for Oscar Piastri. I've got 3 RX-7s or rotary cars. So I'm definitely a car guy. I've got an 88 RX-7 sitting in my driveway. I got to rebuild the motor on. And I used to work with JLR and others on EVs and AI and grid to EV to grid standards and those kind of things. So I'm really, really excited to have this opportunity to jump into this subject with you. But let's take a step back before we really dig in there, and just what was your childhood like? What's your foundation in trust? Where did you build up, or where did you grow up? And what were your parents? And just that system that helped you learn how to make your decisions and understand what to trust and what not to trust come from.
Thanks for that, Matt, and thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about these things too. It's the things that I live and breathe every day, so really I appreciate the opportunity. And I like that you kind of dovetail back to the origin story, because I think we all have a complicated relationship with trust, and it obviously has an intersection of nature and nurture with how you grew up versus how your kind of personality type is. And I'm no exception to that, because I grew up in New Hampshire, in southern New Hampshire, just about 40 minutes north of Boston, so Boston metro area. And I come from an early broken home. My parents separated when I was about 1.5, and so my earliest memories are actually living with my mom and my grandparents, and having a lot of a lot of questions around family structure and wondering
Mm,
why, other kids that I met had this other nuclear structure of mom and dad and brother and sister, and I was in this different environment with my grandparents and no dad. And then, my mom, I will give her so much credit for many things, but she didn't, date a lot. So it was a long time between when my biological father left and then when she reconnected with a high school partner who then became my stepdad and my adopted dad. And so I had this gap time where as a kid I was developing trust in my grandparents and my mom, but there was no real father figure around. Then suddenly, when I had a father figure who, uh, incidentally, is a car guy as well and inspired a lot of my interest in cars and music and all sorts of other things that I kind of like really patterned off of him, gave me this sense of belonging and comfort and ability to then trust the family structure. But always
mm,
then going forward, I had this undercurrent of distrust because I knew that it could all go away.
mm,
I meet a lot of people who, maybe had a more predictable childhood. And so then when something disrupts that or threatens that, it really takes them by surprise or off guard. And I kind of didn't have that. I kind of always just had this belief in chaos that things are bound to change. They're never going to be the same. And you have to just adapt and roll with that from a very young age. Um, and so that's kind of why I've brought that into all of my undertakings in work and industry and technology to always balance the fact that you should build systems that um, inspire trust, but you shouldn't trust them just because they're a system.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I had an interesting kind of occurrence in my life. We have a really similar childhood, actually. I didn't know my dad until I was 23, and now that I've met him, he's a great guy. We hang out every once in a while, but he doesn't live anywhere near me. And I think it really created a conflict with me in understanding, what's the nature versus nurture side of things, and is trust something that is like nurtured into you and you learn it through earning it, or others like earning it from your side, or is it just natural for you to trust? And I'm still kind of conflicted on that question, but what are you thinking from that perspective?
Well, and it's a really difficult thing to unpack because people are so
Yeah.
nuanced and the subtleties of our nature and nurture are so hard to unpack. There's no clear black and white. But I will say that my take on my experience is just that I am a default optimist and I have default trust. I have like Labrador energy, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm everybody's best friend as soon as I meet them, and I just trust them 100% unless they give me reason not to. And that has burned me and created other, issues. But I can only imagine that while I am very trusting and very optimistic, that upbringing side, the nurture side, and the experiences that I had have tempered it. And
Yeah.
I would probably, my best guess is that, without being an armchair psychologist, I would be way more trusting and way more kind of maybe even to the level of being clingy or something if I didn't have the life experience nurture side to temper that default personality. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's really strange because like I I grew up like I had a 1992 Mitsubishi Eclipse when I was 15 years old, and I blew the engine in it within a month of having it. And no one in my family worked on cars or knew anything about cars, so I feel like I started to build a really strong sense of trust in myself because I said screw it. I took the car over to my buddies. We ripped the engine out. I went to a junkyard. I found another one. I swapped it in. Like no mentor there to help me, but I was able to look at it, and it's a simple enough car to where like I could figure it out on my own. But then when I was 22, 23, I met my older brother, and he was a diesel technician. And I started working on cars with him in his shop in Maryland. And then we're working on these cars, and he's like, he rolls out from under a truck one day. He's like, holy crap, Matt, you sound just like our dad. Like the way you laugh, the way you talk, the jokes you make, just I'm down here and I have to keep reminding myself that I'm here with you and not with him. And it's just been such a like this isn't the first time I think I've talked about this publicly. But it's been such a like thing that's constantly in me is it's like, do I have that trust because of the things that I've done and the experience that I've built to trust myself because I didn't have those support systems? Um, or, do I just know that they can fade away, kind of like you said? And so I'm always cautious of them. Like when I introduce myself, I'm one of the things I say pretty frequently is, "Hi, I'm Matt Yarger. I have trust issues." Just because I don't trust implicitly.
Just get it
So it's
right out
really
there.
interesting to me that we have like a similar childhood, but very differing like opinions on trust and how we trust people initially.
Yeah, it's interesting too because then the way that we then structure foundations of trust in our work and
Hmm.
our experience, and like you said, working on cars and things, really is impacted by that, and it puts you on a different path than other people who maybe look at trust a bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we had our initial intro call, you said that you lived in the US, of course, with New Hampshire and all that, but you've also lived in Australia. You worked in hospitals and logistics yards. So, like, kind of stepping up in age a little bit. What was that moving point for you? Was like there a critical juncture in your childhood where you moved to Australia, or was that like a professional point in your life where you're like, okay, I'm going to go take this job?
Oh, it's probably a bit more stereotypical or tropey than that, which is that I was lured here by a partner, lured by a woman. Um,
Uh,
but it was my wife. We went to high school together in New Hampshire, and so we've known each other
okay.
for 35 years or something at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, 32 years. But we then kind of went our separate ways and went to college in different places and stuff, and then got back together later on in our 20s. And she got a job
That's so
offer
rare.
here in Australia. Yeah, I mean, she's what I call an Aussophile. She's been obsessed with Australia from a very young age. So she said,
The
like if I
spiders
got a
and the
job,
snakes and the scorpions didn't scare her?
they're not as bad in the cities. So you do see them. It's kind of shocking when you wake up and you see this like gigantic tarantula on your wall in the city. But it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. There's lots of nice things too. Have you been
Yeah.
down here? Have you been down to Sydney or
No,
anywhere in Australia?
I applied for a Hitachi Rio Tinto program for my company. So hopefully we get accepted for a pitch event in April and I get the chance to come down. But
Oh,
we're
cool.
waiting another month or so to hear back from that. But it's always been on my list. It's just that flight
It's far.
is yeah, it's far.
Well, and
Australia, Singapore, Tokyo. Those are like three of the top spots I want to go to that I haven't been to yet.
it's awesome. It's worth it. Nobody regrets it. The only advice I have is no matter what you do, don't come for like just a week because I have friends
Yeah,
who have done that. And after you get over the jet lag, it's time to go home.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
I mean,
but
my
it's
wife
interesting you
and I
say
are
that.
at a point in our career where like we've got our kids. We want to make sure that they travel and get to see all the things that we didn't get to see. And so this summer is going to be our first year where we're like, hey, we're going to go to Portugal for like 4 weeks, and we both can work remote, so we're going to take them, experience the culture, and like really immerse ourselves. But and that's going to be a thing moving forward, hopefully, where we pick a different city, and for that first month of summer, we just like we go and we're there.
Oh, that's great. We actually want to do the exact same thing because your kids are a little bit older than mine. Like you're a bit in the future from me because mine are 6 and 2, 6 and 1.5. Same idea. It's like my wife and I love to travel. We love exploring the world, and our kids already do. My son is already nagging me about going to every country in the world. So I'm like, cool. And I'm like, I'm here for it, man. You know what? Whatever
Yeah.
resources we have to do that and live an adventurous life, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I was just talking to my oldest son. He's 10. We were talking about it over dinner last night because that's something we really strive to do. Is like we all sit down together for dinner every night. It's not I got to eat dinner here or at the desk or any of that kind of stuff. But he was like, Dad, I was talking to some friends and like they've never been on a plane. I'm like, Tristan, you're 10 and you've flown at least half a dozen times, if not more. I didn't get on a plane until I was going to war when I was like 19.
I was 19. I wasn't going to war. I was also 19. I went to Las Vegas, and I was just like,
Oh, that's a
oh my,
much easier trip than Iraq.
a lot easier trip. But still, for us, 19, right? And now my son
Yeah.
is 6, and he's been on a plane like half a dozen times.
Yep. Absolutely. It's just like
Lucky
this. I think
kid.
this is what every parent wants. Like it's kind of reinforcing that trust in ourselves because we've been able to provide something that we always wished we had.
Yeah. Well,
But
like we were
man,
talking about
I'm
music,
excited.
being able to provide an example for the kids and then support them to explore and latch on to the things that they want to do is just a gift that any parent can have. And then, who knows what our kids, when they have kids, the world will have changed again, and maybe they'll be teleporting and be like, "You've never teleported before?" I'm
Jesus
like, "Oh man, I grew up in a world without teleporters." It's like
yeah.
the same thing will happen probably.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier that works with NASA on some of their advanced programs, and I was like, man, it's a goal of me and my co-founder. Like, we want to be involved in the first space elevator. Like, that's a thing that we think is going to be pivotal when it's not shuttles to get to space, but we can actually build out a real space elevator. We've got a hub up there. Like
Oh,
the leaps in technology over this lifetime are going to be, as long as we can not destroy the planet in the process,
in the
are going to be
meantime,
pretty incredible.
how far away do you think we are from a space elevator? Like if they were to do one to just a low Earth orbit, how far away would the technology be to actually accomplish that?
I think the technology is not too far away. It's just the infrastructure. It's kind of the EV
Mm,
question, do we deploy the vehicles or do we upgrade the infrastructure first? And I think we've got to have a little bit more infrastructure up there to support like the top and bottom approach than we do now. Like we don't have a moon base, but there's a plan now, and we're going to work on it. And there's a Mars plan, and like as those things come together, they give us the top and bottom coverage and the resources outside of our planetary boundary, hopefully,
yeah,
to build something a lot more effectively than we can do right now.
yeah, that would be incredible.
Yeah. So a critical question is recurring in every episode. But do you have a moment, and I know you had pointed towards a few in our intro call, but do you have a moment when your trust was either broken or built in a person or a system or an organization, and how that shaped how you make your choices today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and we talked about it a little bit last time we spoke. I think having trust broken, maybe passively versus actively, can be very
Hmm.
different experiences. And so what I mean by that is if you trust in a system and the system fails you because it is not designed in a way that it can always suit all circumstances, and it was no malicious intent of the system to do so, but it failed you. You lose trust in one way. If you lose trust in a person or a thing because it actively deceived you, I think it's a very different thing psychologically for people,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And I think we
yeah,
need to really think about that and make sure that we understand the difference between the two, because I think there's lots of people, and not to pass judgment in any way, but there's people who maybe are a bit overly cautious or overly worried about things that they can't control, like losing trust in something like a system that they really have no influence on, or doesn't care about them, and it's like, well, it never cared about you in the first place, so you shouldn't have really put too much trust in it in the first place either. Whereas people, it can be very different. You actively put your
yeah.
trust into someone, and then if it breaks it. And so we talked about, one of my previous work experiences where there was this, verbal agreement to a co-founding relationship and to share equity in something going forward. And then unfortunately I trusted too much and didn't put any legal or, paperwork structure around that, and
Mm,
let it get a little bit too far down the track. And then that other person changed his mind and decided that he didn't want to go forward with that. And I missed out on, being able to grow and nurture a couple of business businesses that I'd founded, really, and were holding
mm,
my intellectual property. Um, so having like things, something like that stolen from you, I think, again, people react different ways. For me, it was absolutely gutting. Like it was probably the most sad I've been,
yeah.
aside from losing my grandparents and things like, like in a work and business context. I was just so crushed because I didn't think it would matter that much. It wasn't so much that I was surprised about being deceived. I think I was, and it stinks when those things happen. It was more like people need to qualify and calibrate trust based on the implications to them. And
Mm,
maybe I'll give you a quick example. In medical devices, right? We have three classes of device: class one, two, and three, and there's subgroups in those, right? But a class three device might be an implantable pacemaker, something that's you need an
oh
incredible
yeah.
amount of trust in. And a class one device is something that you don't need as much trust in. A bandage or gauze, you trust it, but it's not going to kill you. So
Yeah.
I think as people, we have a similar structure. This is why we have those systems and those structures, because they represent the way that we think about the world. And similarly, being able to put my trust in a person at a, shall we say, class one level, where it's like, oh, I trust you. It's fine. It'll be okay. But then when the rug gets pulled out from under you, to realize that the feelings and the implications to you are at a class three emotional level. I didn't calibrate the system properly trust wise. So that's probably the thing that really changed my decision making going forward, was make sure that you really understand what the implications are going to be, and then build in the level of trust that is appropriate to what the outcome might be.
Yeah, it's kind of that risk management process that you have to factor in, and it's a very like logical way of approaching it too. To where if you don't ever think about it, you're just like it's an on and off switch. Either I trust them or I don't. But what we understand more as we mature and experience is there's levels to it. Like loyalty can have a time limit if someone keeps betraying your trust. If they say, "Hey, I'm going to do this at this time. I'm going to have you this at this time, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z," and they keep saying these things, but consistently they're not keeping up with their word. Like you might be a very loyal person, but eventually you've got to say, like, okay, do I can't trust this person for anything they say, because everything they promise ends up going weeks or months beyond, or like underachieving on what they said it was going to. So then you have to kind of step back and say, like, okay, well, what are my tiers here? Like, what's the risk? Is this something I really need to worry about? Or is this just, if he doesn't deliver, then it's a lost lead. That's not a big deal. But if it's a lost company, that's a much bigger deal.
Yeah. Reliability is a whole nother thing to unpack, especially like the
Mm-hmm.
relationship of reliability to trust, because I think you bring up an interesting point that it's the stack of reliability events, or however you want to quantify the reliability, that then allows you to trust or not trust.
Yeah.
Trust is the outcome, or the state of the system based on the reliability of the sub pieces. And that's something that I learned in, electrical engineering and medical devices, especially, is like we'd have to sit there and look at, we had these criterion for people who aren't in that world, but maybe like want to think about it. If you look at any device that you have, like you look at your phone and the inside, every one of those little resistors and capacitors and components inside there has been stress tested to measure how many hours you can expect it to last on average, with the statistical component around that. Just like a light bulb, maybe, is a better example.
Mm. Yeah.
How many hours is a light bulb gonna last? And it's actually an interesting story. Maybe really quick side diversion is one of the biggest like public breaches of trust was the light bulb industry.
Hmm.
Way back in the early 20th century, light bulbs, the first incandescent light bulbs, coming out of Edison's patents and all that stuff, those things would last for thousands of hours. They're incredibly durable. But as they became widely mass popular and more companies started taking them up, the light bulb industry actually colluded to defraud the American public by saying, we're going to build obsolescence into these light bulbs to make sure that they fail after a certain number of hours so that we can sell more light bulbs. And it was a
Oh man.
coordinated a coordinated lie that they created. So you talk about systems and trust and all these things, and it's like really funny how those can play out in the real world.
Yeah. Does the pursuit of profit or just general greed kind of erode your ability to do something that creates trust as well? Like light bulbs aren't the first or the last industry we've seen that in. We see it everywhere now. You see it with medical when it comes to prescriptions, and like, oh, it might only cost cents on the dollar to produce this, but insulin and the things that diabetics need, we're going to charge thousands of dollars for it. Or even with vehicles, if you look at like a 1970 Chevelle, you can drive that thing into the ground. Or like a 85 like Ford pickup, like they've got 2 million miles on them on the original engine and they're still going fine. You get a 2020 Mercedes and then you make it to 150,000 miles, and that
Whew,
is like, whoa, you're lucky.
impressive.
And
Well,
it's
and
because
you
we've
like Japanese cars
taken the
too, right? You said
reliability out of it.
you got the RX-7, and I had
Oh god.
Subarus, and I've got a Mazda now. Yeah, but I mean, like, what was the inroad for the Japanese cars in the 70s? It was fuel efficiency and reliability.
Yep.
Gas cost went way up, so they got an inroad with the gas cost, and then reliability. People were like, these things just run forever. My friend had a Honda with 350,000 miles on it, on the original motor. Changed brakes and tires, and I was like, what?
Yeah, I had a '89 Mercedes 300D, the diesel, inline six, and thing had like 480,000 miles on it. And walk out, cranked right up. I had to replace a fuse in it every once in a while for the AC. That was pretty much it. There was no issue. I paid $2,000 for the car, and I drove it every single day.
It's unreal, like how that plays out. And we have to deal with that in every system, because every calibration of something you buy with your own money, you want to know how long it's going to last. Australia is an interesting place in
Mm,
consumer laws, different than some other places, different than the US. Like, I think we get a mandatory, like, government mandated 2-year warranty on electronics. So even if the manufacturer only wants to give you 1 year, the government mandates that they have to give you 2 years. So your TV and your phone and all these things.
okay, I like that.
Because we've all been forced to just get into this throwaway culture for electronics, where it just dies and you buy a new one, and it's there's ups and downs to that kind of pursuit of
Yeah,
profit at the sake of
yeah, absolutely.
reliability.
Okay. Well, so let's kind of dig into a little bit more your professional side. So you started out more so in like medical devices and regulated hardware, and you kind of like pointed towards that a little bit, but like when did that start for you? Was that like you went to college for that and you jumped into it, or did you just kind of like fall into it?
Well, I always grew up wanting to be a doctor. I think, I've told this story to a few people, but I had really bad asthma as a kid. And
Mm,
like, to the point where I would get hospitalized sometimes if I had a really bad asthma attack, and was on medication and inhalers and all that stuff. I'm very lucky it went away when I hit puberty. So, like, once I was like 13, suddenly it started going away, which is amazing. But up until that point, it was always a worry, always a baseline stress in my life, and for my mom as well. So I just always really looked up to doctors, because these doctors were taking care of me, and they were helping me, and they were saving my life occasionally.
yeah.
And I wanted to do that. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Like, what if I could be a pediatrician and help kids? Like, it just seemed like such a noble, ego-driven thing. Like, oh, I would like to do that for somebody else. But then, when I got to high school, I took physics in 11th grade, and they had a unit on electricity, and I just was in love. It was like love at first sight. The whole concept of electricity and how it works and the physics underneath it, I fell absolutely in love with it. And I'm not a mathematician by any nature. That's not my strength, but that combination of mathematics and the real world, like,
Yeah.
a- and that's obviously driven me to where I am today as well. It's like, how does science and mathematics and these systems translate into real world outcomes and things? And so electronics, I was like, this is amazing. And so that inspired me when I went to Northeastern in Boston. I did electrical engineering, but always within the back of my mind, I would love to do something aligned to medicine or healthcare. And I got this opportunity right out of college to join a company that made infusion pumps mainly. So if you go to the
Okay.
hospital, you need blood or saline or whatever infused into you. That's what they were making. And even more interesting, they were making these fluid warmers, because their specialty was what they call fast flow infusion pumps. So if you go into the hospital after a motorcycle crash or a gunshot wound, or
Oh,
you're losing a lot of fluid, right?
yeah.
Um, you're going to die, because your blood pressure is going to drop and there's no blood in you. And so they need to pump a lot of fluid in you. Well, guess where they keep all that fluid? The saline and the lactated ringers and the blood in the refrigerator. So if they need to start pumping massive amounts of fluid into you, yeah, your blood pressure might stay stable, but now you're going to die of hypothermia, right? So they made this incredibly clever device. It was, invented by a company called Level One in Massachusetts, that had this spiral heat exchanger, and you'd run
Okay.
warm water up through the inside, and the fluid or blood would go down on the outside, separated by this aluminum tube, and would warm it up. So get it up to
Yep.
body temperature before it goes into you, and rapidly, like on demand. Imagine like a zip tap, to be able to do that. And that was what I worked on. And I was just, again, I was in love. I was like, this is amazing. What am I doing with my life? I love this. It was so fun.
Yeah. And it's
And
such a
and then
simple thing, but it makes such a huge difference too, I'm sure.
yeah, and you know what's crazy? It's still on the market today. That was 20 years
Wow.
ago. 21 years ago or something that I designed this key piece of air bubble detection and clamping thing that bolted onto the original, and we reinvented the whole thing, and it's still on the market, still in use
Yeah,
in
because that's a big
thousands
thing.
and
You don't
thousands of
want air to
hospitals.
go into the veins.
So that was a big problem that in Germany, especially, there were these nurses that would like use half of a bag of fluid,
Oh
and
no.
then they'd rehang it on the pole, and then the next patient would come in, and they just reuse that bag. And if they didn't, what we call burp the bag, like get the air
Hmm.
out, yeah, like people did die. Unfortunately, there was a field action about that because people died from it, and they said, well, look, the benefit of this device outweighs that risk generally because you're saving thousands of people and a couple people might get hurt, but like you need to fix that. And that was my first big project, was designing a system that would ultrasonically detect if there was air coming through the tube and then automatically clamp it down before that tube got in, and then automatically flush the air out so you could continue
Wow.
treating the patient. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you really like from the beginning, you've been focused on how to kind of build trust into the systems that we save lives. Like that's, I mean, that's a great way to start a career.
Matt, that's really interesting. I had not made that connection that that device was basically a trust device, because
Hmm.
you have a system that works, but
People
there's
make
this thing that you
mistakes,
can't
but you
trust
can,
because
yeah.
nicely done, Matt. Well done. Bravo. No, I hadn't thought of that that
I
way.
think I'm getting okay at this. Like, this is our 20 something episode. So I'm like starting to figure out, like, oh, that's a trust point. Like, that's a point where, like, this is an example of trust in the real world, but people don't necessarily think about it. That's one of the reasons I started the podcast in the first place is like, oh, we need more trust in this thing. But okay, what does that mean? Like, how do we do
Yeah.
that? What's an example of like building trust into a system or like solving for trust between companies and a B2B solution or like what is trust really and how can we just be more conscious about the systems we're designing and the decisions we're making and factor that in at every point.
Yeah. And really think about it intentionally. That's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's an awesome start to your career, but then you were in that for a little bit and you moved into logistics and supply chain. So like how did that transition happen for you?
Oh, look, it's simple. It goes back to that previous story about how I lost trust and got,
Mhm.
fooled by that person. So I was working here in Sydney at that time, and basically after that kind of breakup, I just quit my job and said, "Well, crap. Now what am I going to do with my life?" And so, I was in my late 30s at the time, and I thought, well, if I'm going to start my own venture, it's either now or never, because we were going to have kids and all that stuff. And so I just decided I'm going to start my own business. I don't know what it's going to be. Is it going to be in medical devices or is it going to be in something else? And I had this crazy idea around commute time optimization, like reducing commutes for
Mm.
people, because at the time my sister was working at a grocery store. It was going past three instances of the same grocery store to get to the one that she worked at. And I said, well, why aren't you working closer to home? And that's a whole long story for another time, but basically I met my co-founder through that experiment, who is a PhD in machine learning and optimization.
Mm.
And it opened my eyes to a world that I'd never seen. It was like, a matrix moment where I didn't realize all of the challenges in logistics and supply chain. I didn't realize their impact on the planet, how much carbon is emitted in transport that is avoidable because the systems are so inefficient. And suddenly my whole world pivoted into this efficiency mindset where I'm like, oh, I want to do something socially positive, whether it's again medicine or something else, but I have the option of starting a business that's going to be socially positive, it's going to be environmentally positive, and then I'm open minded from there. And we eventually found our way through that commute optimization thing to Coca Cola. And Coca Cola down
Okay.
here in Australia said, yeah, that's cool what you're doing, but it doesn't really, like, it's not something we can use. But have you thought about applying that same machine learning concept and the technology that you're developing for it to logistics because of all these efficiency problems
Yeah.
and the financial impacts on big logistics companies? And we said, well, we'll give it a try. And suddenly the next thing you know, a few years later, that's all we're doing. We're developing AI and machine learning and operations algorithms and software to minimize emissions from transport networks.
Yeah. I mean, that's just in food logistics alone, and I've kind of touched on trade and logistics in some of my past work. Isn't it like $4 trillion a year in food waste just by the loss of food from the logistics process and the inefficiencies?
I don't know the exact number, but it's insane. It's probably, 40% or more of food gets lost. Of fresh food and produce and stuff gets lost to those inefficiencies. And then
Yeah.
consumer problems in, developed markets where they just don't want to look at ugly fruit or things with blemishes and things like that.
There's whole
It's
businesses around that now, though.
well, and I grew up in a world where there's this narrative that like there wasn't enough food to support the population. We have all these people and there's not enough food. That's BS. There's plenty of food. It's just,
We just don't get it to you
warlords.
well enough.
Yeah, exactly. Like either warlords in Africa are withholding it in order to exert control, or it's getting chucked into a landfill because it doesn't look pretty enough to go in your salad. It's
Yeah.
crazy
Or
once
it
you
gets
unpack that.
stuck in a shipping facility in Puerto Rico right after a hurricane, where they find it 2 years later and didn't even realize it was there.
Literally, like one of the things that we do in our world of trucking with food, especially cold chain and food, is
Mhm.
if you go out in an Amazon truck from the warehouse and you're going out to do a bunch of deliveries of parcels, right? You're just going to start at whatever the closest one is and you're going to work your way through your route. Food, cold chain, it's the exact opposite. They'll start farthest away and
Mm,
work their way back specifically to risk reduce if the truck breaks down or they run out of fuel or whatever. So you start thinking from an electric vehicle standpoint and range anxiety and all that stuff, the interplay between, you know, all these risk mitigations and building trust
yeah,
into a system that allows you to get the food to where it needs to be with the correct temperature, traced and tracked all the way through. It's incredible.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so when it comes to those kind of systems, like, was there a point, like, what's that kind of pivotal point that happened from the Coca-Cola point to that first big customer? Like, you said it was about 2, 3 years, and then was there a point where you looked at it and said, like, okay, the system works, but it's correct, but people aren't trusting it. And so, how do I get them to trust that our system actually does the thing that we need it to do?
It was COVID, and not in the way that you think,
Mm,
or might think, but it was COVID because the entire world of delivery logistics pivoted in that moment, right?
massively.
Yeah, and so many businesses that were delivering to other businesses. So, and let's talk specifically about food, okay? So, if you were delivering to cafes and restaurants and all these places that people go to for food, grocery stores even, now those places are all closed.
Yep.
You People still need to eat. So all those businesses had to pivot to delivering home
Mm,
groceries, meal kits and boxes, anything you can imagine, right? But obviously, DoorDash and Uber Eats, that's point to point stuff for a burger, doesn't satisfy your entire food chain, um, food supply chain, sorry. And so that was where our opportunity arose, is because there was a big company here in Australia that does, they're literally called Home Delivery Services Australia, and they were doing an enormous amount of meal kit deliveries like HelloFresh and Marley's Blue Apron type stuff. And overnight, maybe not overnight, but over the course of a couple months, all these restaurants and grocery stores closed, and now suddenly everybody wants a HelloFresh box.
yeah.
And this company was at the pivotal center of that because that's what they were already doing, but suddenly their demand tripled.
Yeah. You're like, our systems don't scale to this. We weren't prepared for this kind of like massive onboarding event.
Exactly. And that was where our critical opportunity came, where we'd already designed a system that was very modern, very best in breed, machine learning enabled, that then allowed them to follow that scale and follow the demand. And that just gave us our kickoff in terms of a case study and a reputation that we can do interesting things in the space.
Nice. Okay. And so, man, there's so many different directions I can take that in. But when it comes down to like what your system actually is, you've talked about like the digital twin aspect of it and like the logistics network. So like how does your piece of the puzzle solve that optimization, that efficiency issue so effectively?
Well, let's keep it on the trust angle for you, right? Which is
Okay.
the problem that we solved for them was you have an operator in a warehouse and they've got, let's just call it 10,000 deliveries that need to go out tomorrow. Because keep in mind, those meal kit businesses, A lot of it is people on a regular schedule, but during that time especially, it's new customers coming in every day, thousands of
Yeah.
them, right? Suddenly now you've got somebody who's sitting behind a desk and needs to figure out how to efficiently deliver 10,000 meal kits. For years, there's been software solutions to do that, but algorithmically, it's a very complicated thing. It's a difficult mathematical thing because, and we talked a little bit about like trusting Google Maps, right? If you're going between your house and your office, there's lots of different ways that you could go. And if you don't know the shortest one and you're a machine that needs to figure out the shortest one, what do? You calculate all of the possible ways to go and you pick the shortest. That's how Google Maps works. Okay.
Hmm.
And they've obviously hyper optimized that to be pretty efficient, but it's still 2 points. Now say you've got to go between your office, you got to stop at the grocery store, you've got to go to the gas station, you've got to go a few different places, drop off the kids, whatever. Now, how many different ways can you achieve all of those objectives? Well, the short answer is it's a factorial mathematical relationship. So you have to compound exponentially all the different routes that you could take between those different points, calculate the time that it takes to do them all, or the distance, whatever your preference, and then pick the shortest one. So for just 10 points that you need to travel between, there's billions of calculations that the computer needs to
Yeah.
make. Okay,
Yeah. And the
so
level of compute for that too, I'm sure is
level of
intense.
compute, insane. Now imagine you've got 10,000 orders, you've got 100 vans, or call it 1,000 vans. Good luck. Okay. The best supercomputers in the world would take centuries to calculate that. So we use heuristics. We use ways to hack the problem into smaller bits and
Okay.
make
Yeah,
it
I was going to
more
ask, like,
easy to
what's
compute.
heuristics for those that don't know?
It's basically assumptions, like little ways that you can change the problem statement so that you don't need the 100% most optimal shortest solution. You add some boundaries to it, the heuristics that allow you to then create the best thing that you can get in a certain window of time. And so the
Okay.
software that they were using, say with 1,000 orders, might take an hour to solve that with the heuristics that it was using. Right? It might still take an hour to solve that solution for the 100 vans and the 10,000 orders or something. And ours can do it in a few minutes. That was the
Wow.
advancement that we made. But add on the level of trust. So the other problem is, say you wait an hour for that solution, it comes back and you look at it and you go, no, that's not going to work because this driver won't go to that area, or it's made a bad assumption around,
There's a data point that's missing that you hadn't considered in the
something.
model.
Exactly. And the model isn't omnipotent. It doesn't know everything. It has to have boundaries that are trained by a human. And it just made the wrong choice. And now what are you going to do? Rerun it for another hour? I'm sitting here, I'm on the clock. I got to get these deliveries out in the morning, and my warehouse is waiting for me to pick and pack them because now I need time to get them onto the loading dock. So this person is under stress. That lack of trust in the system flows downstream and upstream. It flows downstream all the way to the consumer if it's wrong and the consumer doesn't get their box, or it's at the wrong time or the wrong day. And it goes all the way upstream to management where they're like, well, what's wrong? Why are we struggling here? And they say, well, it's this one pinch point. I don't have trust in it. And then the drivers, you give a route to a delivery driver, and you got this salty old guy who's been driving this van for 30 years, and you tell him how to eat his breakfast, so to speak, and he says, no, that won't work. I don't like that route. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Trust, right?
I mean, you
And
see
that's a
that.
whole nother story. Yeah.
You see that with DoorDash and Uber. Like you order something and you can track them on the map and the way they're going. You're like, why are they going that way? That way doesn't make any sense. And you see it with like Gemini and Chat and Claude and all those as well. Just like if you're using them, especially professionally, to like come up with an expected output, you go through the process a little bit. And you're like, oh man, it's not even considering this. So now I got to go in and factor that in. So like your suggestions or like your edits or drafts or whatever aren't actually solving my problem because there's a piece of the puzzle that you're not seeing. You don't have full sight on the actual issue.
Yeah, exactly. They're probabilistic, right? We know about LLMs. They're not exact. They're taking the probability of the next word that they choose, whether they pick the highest. And our systems are similar. These heuristics, right? You don't have that level of compute and omnipotence to give you anything better. And then you apply AI on top of that, and it just makes it
Mhm.
worse in some instances, because now you're like adding a probabilistic system on top of a probabilistic system, which anybody knows probabilities from
Oh
school,
man.
right? So AI isn't just the silver bullet solution, because you're actually adding more question marks into it.
Yeah. I mean, man, I got to rewrite my book. We have something that
Everybody
internally
releases new editions, right? That's the reason you release a new edition.
luckily it's not published yet, luckily.
Oh,
But
good.
we have this like internal thesis at Demia where it's trusted data for trusted AI. And I'm like, yeah, you need trusted data to create trust in AI and the outputs that it gives you. Well, trusted data doesn't lead directly into trusted AI. There's a whole trusted system that needs to come in the middle. And I don't think that clicked in my head until you just said that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? This the infrastructure that we rely on to create the outcomes, absolutely garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have good
Mm-hmm.
data going in, you're not going to be able to trust it. But how do you trust the mechanism of the system? Let me give you a
Yeah.
really interesting, and maybe this is related to the way that I think about trust. So that exact device I talked to you about before, the air detector, my boss at the time, bless his heart, he's passed on now, and I still miss him. He told me at that time, he said, I need you to make this air detection clamp device without any software. And his reason was purely selfish, because in 2004 or whatever, when this was, software medical device regulations were still developing, and people were still trying to figure out, like, how do you regulate and do risk assessment and mitigation on software, right? So he said, I don't want to have to deal with that stuff. It's too hard. Just make it hardware, which
Hmm.
I won't explain in too much detail, but basically was like throwing a grenade at me and saying, like, quick, design a system to contain that grenade. I'm like, oh, it's in my hand. So basically what it means, though, is that I had to build what's called a Moore machine. And
Mm.
it's a system whereby your predictable inputs, and that would be, is there air from the detection sensor? Is there a button press from the user? Is a certain alarm already on, or is it not on? These inputs go through the system, and then they're recycled. The outputs lead you to a thing. Is there air? Do you clamp it? Do you set an alarm? All the things. And all those loop back into the system. It's this recursion in a hardware system. And it's a network of circuits that I had to design by hand, basically,
Oh,
to create that.
jeez.
Oh, it's crazy hard, and it's so fun and difficult and satisfying when you get it right. But think about it this way too: the trust required in that system is so much higher even than a software system, because you can't change it once you lock it in.
Yeah.
Software, yeah, cool. Like, oh, it's not right. I can just go and iterate it and I'll fix the bug, right? No, man, this thing's printed on a circuit. Once you're locked
Yeah.
in, it's like your book, right? Like, you put a lot of work in this, and it's not easy to go back and just tweak.
Oh man, I haven't messed with circuit diagrams or any of that in what feels like forever, but I know like I haven't it's I'm excited and I'm also like ashamed of myself because like I'm building software and I know like stage gates and all that kind of stuff when it comes to like the electrical diagramming of things and components and how they work. But I don't step back enough sometimes to think of like how do we make it that concrete, like you mentioned it earlier, that device is still on the market. It's been 21 years and it still sells because you simplified it to a point where you could, simplified in quotes, to where you could print it and you could make it real without needing to have the backup to go in and change it in the future. Like you drilled down to such a level that you said this thing is going to work and we've tested it, and like any kind of flaw or input that could change it, we've accounted for that. The level of
Like,
diligence that takes.
every input had a binary state, right? And
Mm-hmm.
even if that was quantum, it would have 3 states, but you can test it and you can be sure. Once you get
Yeah.
there, you can be 100% sure, 100% confidence, which is so interesting, going back to what we were talking about with heuristics, right? Where we literally don't have 100% confidence by design because it's too hard. And
Did you
if I
get
took that
feedback from like the
system,
doctors on that process too? Like on your initial like deployments of that, were they just like, "Holy crap, this is incredible"?
oh no, it was the exact opposite, because
Oh
the
no.
first, no, the first version of it was, the electronics that I designed worked pretty okay, and there weren't really any dramas with that. There were minor ones, but nothing that the doctors cared about. But it was the door. You have to put the tube in a slot, and there's a door to hold the slot in. And my partner in crime, who was a mechanical engineer, bless his heart, he's passed on too, unfortunately. But he tried to be too clever, and he made the, the door too hard to use and all this stuff. So again, right, complex systems. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell people this as a systems engineer: the best complex systems are built on simple, reliable systems.
It has
Like
to
we
be
all,
simple.
right? And so as soon as it gets beyond your vision and it's a neural net where you're like, I don't even understand how this thing works, how do you have trust in it?
Yeah. Like if you haven't looked at it at the depth where all those binary inputs and outputs, then you can't simplify it enough. And I think that's one of the problems with like the lean agile approach to things is like, oh, I'll just fix it later. Like, no, like try to get it right. At least a small piece of a big problem. Get that small piece right first and then get the next small piece right.
So true,
Like,
because again, that all the way back to the beginning, right? What's the implication of it failing?
yeah.
And if you get all the way down that path and that first piece fails, everything you've done could be for nothing at that point. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe not if you've risk mitigated it properly, but you have to think about that if you don't want to go back to the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dive into an analogy that you made before when we were talking about like trusting applications as well. So like Google Maps, Apple Maps, we trust those pretty implicitly. We just had a new roundabout built outside of my neighborhood, and it took them probably 3 to 4 months to update the maps for it. So like, there's a little bit of like, I don't trust this specific point on the map, so I'm going to divert and do my own thing. But most people like trust it pretty implicitly. um but if they don't trust it, they stop using it. And like, that's exactly what I'm saying here is like, I trust it, but I don't trust it in this specific context. So I'm going to take this circle because I know it's faster and going the way that the map's going to tell me, because the map doesn't know it exists yet. So where does trust usually break when it comes down to like those analogies of maps and systems and not having the right inputs in your current professional circle? Like when it's the logistics data and autonomous vehicles and EVs and like those kind of things you're working with now, what are the biggest like points where just people just don't trust it, or they keep an eye for it because that's where the issue is going to come from?
Well, do you want to think about it from like the consumer standpoint, or maybe the systems and the driver standpoint? What do you think is most interesting, or
Oh
even
man,
the back
how much time do
office?
we have?
Yeah, I know, right? Because it's it's so complicated. It's been fun for me to learn about, but it's also just it's a huge field.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll give you an example. Okay, that's also a bit self-serving because it just gives me the ability to highlight some of the fun stuff that we've done, right? Um, as I mentioned, humanistic AI and technology and automation is really a key part of what we want to do. It's got to be socially positive. So we want the workers in the supply chain workforce to actually benefit from this technology, not just be automated away. Um, and so one of the things that's really interesting is there's this building here in Sydney. It's called the Queen Victoria Building, and it takes up an entire city block. It's like a giant
Oh
shopping
wow.
mall and venue and all this stuff. It's a whole city block, and it's this beautiful old Victorian building, right? So if you're a delivery driver, say you're just a parcel courier for the postal service, right? And our routing algorithms in our system, if you're say delivering to one of the shops at that building on the southeast corner, we're going to route you from whatever your last delivery is to that southeast corner. All the streets around it are one-way streets. So
Mm,
if you've got another delivery that's maybe at the northwest corner, the opposite side of the block, right? The algorithm, rightfully so, by default is going to say, well, you know what? I got to go this one-way street all the way around to get to that corner. So I'm going to take you to do a bunch of other deliveries that are kind of on the way. And then you're going to circle back around and you're going to do that one up there. Sounds great on paper, but for any courier in the real world, you know what they actually do is they spend 70% of their time on foot in cities,
mm-hmm.
because parking is a nightmare in cities and it costs them a lot of money and they get parking tickets. And so if I'm a courier and I get a parking spot anywhere nearby where my deliveries are, I'm going to do as much as I can from that one parking spot on foot. But the routing algorithms aren't aware of that. and they aren't aware of necessarily the best ones to group, because also we can't predict where you're going to park. That's a whole nother thing, right? You can't do that yet. Maybe in the future with fully autonomous systems and all that, you can, but right now, no. So what we did is simply built what we call a sub-clustering algorithm that will say, for that high density area, the metropolitan or the central business district type area where it's really dense, if they have a lot of deliveries, set a threshold to like, how far do you want to walk? How far from a parking spot do you want to walk? We will then group all the deliveries in those areas into these subgroups. And then you
Okay.
park and you walk to all of them. So we talk about trust, right? A delivery driver that sees the first version will look at that and be like, this is awful.
Nope.
This system doesn't know what it's doing. It's terrible. Nope. But they see a little tweak of that second version and they go, oh, these guys kind of know what they're doing. This is matching the way I would do it. Another great example is cargo bike couriers. We used to have a customer, and we were actually co-located in the same office building, and their cargo bike couriers would be down the bottom. And I used to joke, I used to hang out and chat with them, and they'd be having lunch, and I would ask them, a little bit sneakily about like, how was your route today? Like, are the systems okay? And they didn't know that I worked for the company that actually did all the routing for them. And I was just trying to find out if we were doing a good job. And I would
Yeah.
joke with my colleagues and also with the bosses for that company, like, yeah, the guys basically didn't complain today, so it must be pretty good. Like, they've got so many problems, but like when you're out there in the real world delivering these things, like trying not to get hit by cars or get stuff thrown at you by angry customers, like if the routes are okay and they're not complaining about them, that means they're really good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes it's really hard to get the user feedback too. Like, I don't like filling out surveys. I don't know about you, but having them that close and just being like, able to go and ask them the question, if they were a few blocks over, that's not a scalable way to do things. But sometimes you got to do it the not scalable way so that you can understand the thing that's going to help build trust in your system more.
Yeah, and there's a lot of debate in that in the startup community now, right? Like in Silicon Valley about founder-led versus manager-led, like founder mode and
Mm,
manager mode. I've been, reading a lot about that too, because it's like the farther away you get from the customer, the harder it is to get that feedback, which might indicate a flaw in your critical system.
yeah.
Just like we were talking about, right? Like if something's broken in that, and then you're continuing to scale and build on top of something that is fundamentally not where it needs to be, you're just amplifying the error. So
Yeah. So
I
like,
love talking to those guys.
so would you kind of integrate your system between like a Walmart and a DoorDash?
I mean, at the point, what we do now is more so because DoorDash will rely on low volume vehicles, and we focus on
Okay.
high volume stuff. That's
Oh,
kind of our
okay.
jam, is consolidation of highest volume stuff, because that's where you win the most in both costs and with emissions.
Okay. So it's more of like a Amazon UPS type of situation than a Walmart DoorDash situation.
Correct, correct. Walmart more so in the sense of like their distribution center to store or store to customer,
Mm,
but via their own
okay.
private fleet and vans and trucks. Anytime you get
Got
down
you.
to the level of like a sedan or a motorbike, it's just there's not much to gain there. It's
Yeah, you're arguing over like much smaller points of efficiency than like the large ones that you're considering right now, and like we want to solve the biggest problem we can as effectively as we can, of course.
exactly, and when you do that, then the other problems become much easier.
Hmm.
You've done the hard one first. But to be honest, Matt, like the blue sky room in the consolidation and the big side of things is still so big that investors would always tell us, "Oh, you really need to chase down that high volume DoorDash style delivery stuff because it's just such a huge market. You'll make a lot of money." And I'm like, "Yeah, but honestly, it is a huge market, but it's supply chain in general is $1 trillion industry. I mean, we got
Yeah,
plenty of things to do over on this side first."
yeah, and like they're both extremely large markets, but like your system might not scale to that kind of approach. There's a lot of smaller, like last mile problems that you have to consider that your system might just not be suited for. So stick to the thing that is working and that's solving a big problem because it's not like there's not enough of it to go around for you to solve.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in developing markets and Southeast Asia and stuff where we're located near.
Hmm.
It's easy to think about it from a developed economy and infrastructure context, but then you look at the systems that are being developed in Asia, it's really cool because
Oh, I'm
they've
sure they're
basically
much
learned
different.
from yeah, they've learned from everybody else's mistakes, and they're not going to repeat them. So yeah, these systems are built in day one.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking on that future side of things, like when it comes to AI and autonomous vehicles and like, the new Tesla AVs that they keep talking about and we'll see them on the street in 7 years or something. What's that look like for your model? Like how do your systems integrate with that kind of system versus more of a human-led system?
Yeah, our goal is to build the infrastructure, the digital software infrastructure to enable those types of activities to continue to evolve and to be experimental. So, the term digital twin is a bit played out, but at the end of the day, it's still relevant because it is a digital representation of the real world.
Yeah.
Mapping data, right? I hate to tell people if they don't want to think about it that way, but Google Maps is a digital twin of the real world that you are using to navigate. So that's what we want to build, and what we have built, and continue to build, is this simulation framework that allows all these decisions to be made and to be computed reliably and with trust. And that's going to be even more relevant when we take the humans out of the loop, because
Yeah.
now I've ridden in Waymos and stuff, and I quite like it. It's cool, but the delivery component of that, there's been many different experiments and the ways to do it, but I think it's the convergence of three technologies that are really critical to enable it, which is the vehicles, the autonomous vehicles, and being able to maneuver in a city. The robotics, because it's the last meter challenge that we talk about. Delivery. We often talk about last mile being more than half of the complexity and half of the cost of a delivery, and that's just basically from the store or the warehouse to your house. But what about when it gets to your house and now a robot needs to navigate between the sidewalk to your door, and it's got to navigate all those things? So that's a robotics problem, but those robots won't be able to deal with that real world without AI. So you've got
Yeah.
autonomous vehicles, robotics, and AI converging at a rapid rate. I do see that probably being relevant within the next 10 years, that we will see real traction in that. And I'm very open-minded to the types of robots. They could be on wheels and legs, and probably not drones, because drones are still just not energy efficient enough, especially in the US. So yeah, I think that's where we're headed, is building that framework from the vehicle lens, but then our evolution is then how do you navigate and map and create optimal decisions for that last meter challenge between the vehicle and the house, and then how do
Mm.
you do that at scale?
Okay. So you are still looking at that, like getting it to the doorstep problem. It's just not through like a Walmart to DoorDash situation. It's the UPS driver and FedEx driver or DHL or what have you that is doing it at a much larger scale, with much more complex routes and a lot more packages.
And think about the example I gave you before, which was a bit self-serving, about that subclustering group.
Yeah, yeah.
As soon as you take the human out of it, let me give you a really cool example, right? So I know I won't go too long, I swear. But we did some work with
No,
a
it's
company
fine.
in Hong Kong and in Kowloon. The roads are super small, but this company has an enormous amount of products to deliver. So what they do is they actually put like 6 or 7 guys on the truck, and they drive through this area, and they'll drop a pallet off the truck with a guy, and then the guy will go and deliver that stuff to the local shops, and then they do that 6 or 7 times, and then they loop back around and pick up the guys. So imagine a world where your UPS or your Amazon truck could be doing the same thing with robots, because you don't need 6 or 7 guys. You need 6 or 7 robots, or 10
Yeah.
robots, or 100 robots, or whatever. It's arbitrary. We don't know what it's going to be, but as long as we have a mathematical and software framework to allow that to happen, it could be so many different permutations of it.
Ah. Yeah, yeah, like there's small adjustments in the algorithm that can make tremendous differences, but like depending on where you're at, it's exactly like you say. If you're more rural, you only need like one or two bots on the truck to go out and do the drop offs. If you're in New York City, it's a very different situation. You've got tall buildings to deliver in. You're not always delivering to the front desk. Sometimes you got to go door to door in one building, and that can take differing amounts of time. So there's a lot of details that some people are very very detail oriented and they think about these kinds of things. But I've learned, especially over the last year, some people don't want to be bothered with the details.
Exactly. It's hard. It's hard living in the details because it's so
Yeah.
easy to miss the big picture, or be left behind because you focus on the details and then the market moves on and that detail is no longer relevant. That happens all of the time, right? Especially with startups.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
absolutely.
right. It's top down and bottom up. You gotta be able to manage both and get the right people to represent both.
Are you seeing any issues with the trust factor on the electrification side of things too? Like, I've talked to the guys at Volvo about their shipyard deliveries of their AI autonomous vehicles, like in shipyards, but like the grid versus the wire and the various charging methods is the biggest point of issue. So, like, how do you scale that, and then just the amount of weight that has to be moved in some of these systems?
Oh man, there's so many issues too, because also the robustness and reliability when it comes to different energy sources, renewables are
Hmm.
so what do you call it? Like, time of day dependent and seasonality dependent and things like that. So that decreases trust in renewables. And then you've got bad actors, the ability for AI to infiltrate the grid or mess with it to basically effectively create warfare opportunities against businesses and commerce. And there's all sorts of reasons, which is why when you brought up that you'd worked on vehicle to grid, I actually think that that's one of the biggest opportunities to restore trust by decentralizing power generation. Um,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? You localize
But
anything
you
that
got
you
to fight
localize.
policy. You got to fight through
Ah,
policy to get it done.
exactly. Because it's not in the interests of the energy companies to localize it. They lose control and they lose their margins on it. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
revolutionary
and
in that sense.
we're starting to see for a very local issue in Delaware. We're starting to see this issue where the grid is run by between Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania around the whole Philly area. It's run by like five different energy companies, and the charge per kilowatt hour isn't much, but there's this thing on the supply side that has been creeping up pretty quickly on the cost. So you're seeing some people like I was talking to my wife about it the other day. There's like 20,000 people in Facebook groups that are talking about why did my bill go from $200 a month to $900 a month? And like, but wait, it's not just for my home. This is my second home. No one lives here. And my bill's $900 a month because there's been this way to kind of manipulate the margins and the policies. And it's run by such a small number of companies that the states don't want to deal with it. They can't fight through the policy issues, and the companies are just saying like, "What are you going to do?"
Look, the brutal, honest truth, especially in the US, is like they can't even regulate away the tobacco industry. Like,
Ah,
and
jeez.
I'm an ex-smoker, right? And I'm like, the ability for profiteering to take place where you're literally stuffing poison down to people's throats. What luck will we have with the energy industry? You know what I mean? Like the amount of power that money can buy and exert in those systems is astonishing. And so it is
Yeah,
very difficult to fight back against those things. It takes,
it's a
like you said, 20,000 people need to mobilize to do it. That's the only way that it's going to happen.
yeah, and it's just like I've worked in positive and negative energy districts where like you can have one city block that's sharing energy with another city block because like this one consumes more energy at this time versus this one, and they actually can level themselves on a grid in a very like local and agile way.
Hmm.
And like it doesn't have to be that complicated. It can be a pretty simple system, but sometimes the things that aren't in the system have so much power over what the system's able to do. Like you want to trust the system, but all these external influences are manipulating what it's really able to achieve.
Oh, that's a really interesting point, right? Because the system is ideally designed to solve this problem or to provide this
Yeah.
service, but actually the system is designed to do that and also provide a financial outcome for somebody. And so you have multiple objectives, and this is my optimization guy brain, you have like multiple objectives of the system, and then you optimize for them. And you can go way towards one objective by weighting it towards that, and you could weight it towards the other objectives. And when that balance is off and the weighting becomes less about service delivery and problem solving and more towards profiteering, suddenly now that structure, that system loses trust. I think that's a really interesting thing, is like trust is probably directly correlated. If I were to make a bet, trust would be directly correlated to the level of optimization towards profit. And meaning
Yeah.
trust would probably go down the more the objective of the system is to profit, and trust would go up the more the objective is service delivery and problem solving.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, all of us first time entrepreneurs and founders, we want to build the thing it just solves the problem. But then we get caught in that, like, oh, well, you have to engineer it somewhat to create revenue. And then once you do that, if you're making money from something, there's a good chance that someone else has to lose money in that process. So do you have to fight against that's losing money by you bringing the thing to the market that makes money?
I have a philosophical thing that I like to say to people, that nobody makes money, you just transfer money. So
Exactly.
it's redistribution. You always remember, if you made $1 billion, that's $1 billion that came out of the system. Didn't just didn't just materialize out of nowhere, unless you're the U.S. government printing money. But that's another story.
That's for another
That's
time.
it.
We're not
That's
going to
all.
talk about that today.
But I'm glad you brought it up, because it's true. It's like, it's as startup founders, pricing is a whole nother thing that founders often get wrong, because you just want to solve the problem, you basically give it away, and then suddenly you realize, oh no, I actually really need to think about margins,
Yeah.
and
Well, you got to
price.
think about margins, and then sometimes who you thought was supposed to pay for it isn't the person that's supposed to pay for it.
They're not the one, or by design in their system, the person who gets the value isn't the person with the budget, and just navigating that whole paradigm is so hard.
Yeah, what I think is like one of the most prevalent issues in the climate side of the market is, the people that are trying to do the good thing, they have a big number that's tied to the cost of that good thing, but almost none of it goes to them. It goes to all the other people that they have to work with to accomplish that good thing, or, you know, get through the policies to accomplish that good thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point.
So, kind of a silly thing, but I feel like we've gone this whole episode and we haven't even mentioned your company, like the name. Like we know what you do now, we know what your product is, but like for those that are listening, what
Uh,
company? What's your company? And
who do you work
give
for?
them the 3 minute.
Do you ever watch Kindergarten Cop? It just reminds me of the
Oh
Arnold Schwarzenegger line, "Who's your daddy and what does he do?" Uh, so the company is Adiona Tech, or just
yeah.
we call it Adiona, but legally it's Adiona Tech. And Adiona is the Roman goddess of the return journey. So her and her
Mm,
sister were tasked with helping school children get back and forth safely to school. Like, uh, very simple premise. We liked the name and the sound of it, and it really reflected our values, that we want to do something looking after the future generations, but through a financial lens of industry and education and all that.
yeah, creating positive change for a big problem that is extremely inefficient and requires a shit ton of optimization and deep, detailed thought. And, I'm really excited to have had the opportunity to talk to you about it. But I think this leads into my last question for the episode. I think there's a really significant difference between being known well and being well known. And I prefer that I'm known well, so I talk about my personal stuff quite a bit. And like, I really appreciate you coming in and being a little vulnerable with some of the things we've talked about, like going into some spaces that some people might not be comfortable with. But for the listener, um, what's something that they can walk away with feeling like they know you well?
It's a great question, Matt, and I did think about it a little, and I think what I like to do is inspire people to feel enabled to do what they want,
Hmm.
and to take control, and to take the reins of their own life, which a lot of people feel like they're on a path and they're on a train that they can't get off, or that things are predetermined for them. And to some extent that can be true, but I think there's little changes that happen every day around you, and if you're open to them and you're aware of them, that chaos, that natural ether that's moving around us every day, and changes in the world aren't necessarily scary. They're
Hmm.
opportunities. And I just want people, when they talk to me, to to remember that I am still an optimist and I have their best interest in mind, and I just want them to feel good. And that is so different for different people, and nothing's right and nothing's wrong in that. But I think everybody has the opportunity to charge forward and make themselves feel better over time. And I just want to be a person that helps them think that that's possible.
Man, that's a great way to end it. I really appreciate that, like that sentiment, and I do think it speaks to the heart of like who you are. And a lot of what you said today is you're here to solve problems that are complicated and to help people like accomplish the things that they set out to accomplish, and to leave a greater mark than what you kind of walked into. So Rich, thanks for taking the time today. It's been an awesome conversation getting to know you. I've got so many different ideas, so I'm sure I'm going to follow up with you on a few of them. But for those that are listening, if they want to reach out to you, they want to work with you, they want to use your systems and your solutions, how can they reach out to you? What platform, what kind of system should they be looking for to contact you?
Look, I've been big on LinkedIn for a long time. I love LinkedIn, so feel free to anybody reach out, just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always there, and I think you'll probably have the company in the notes, and they can reach out to me there too. But yeah, Rich Savoie on LinkedIn.
All right, thanks for your time, Rich. Have a good day. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, make sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen, so you don't miss what's coming next. If trust is at the heart of your work, whether in sustainability, business, governance, or personal leadership, I'd love to hear your story. Reach out, share your thoughts, or tag someone who should join the conversation on our socials. Let's shape the future of trust together. Until next time, thanks for listening.